Good morning, folks. Everything new under the sun. It is Monday, May 22nd, 2023. And the news today is very interesting, a variety of things I want to take a look at. I've spoken of Matthew 24, and of course we reference Matthew 24 all the time. It gives a good indication of what's going to be happening in the last days, because the disciples actually say, what's going to be happening in the last days, and when will the last days come, basically. Matthew 24 says, and this is the KJV from BibleHub.com, and as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, Matthew 24, verse 3, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be? What shall be the sign of thy coming and the end of the world? What's going to be happening at the end of the world? And I go down to verse 12 here, and this is what we want to talk about. Read the whole chapter, because it's significant. It shows you exactly what's going to be happening in the last days. Kingdom against kingdom, nation against nation will rise, and there's going to be famines, pestilences, earthquakes in diverse places. The beginning of sorrows, and this is kind of sounds like the four horsemen of the apocalypse, doesn't it? Go read Revelation chapter 12 about the four horsemen and what's happening during that period. But I want to read verse 12, and it says, I'll start in verse 9. Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted. So there's going to be persecution in the last days, and shall kill you. And ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. Christians, not only the disciples in their day, but also in the last days, Christians will be hated by all nations because of Jesus Christ, because of their what they call hate speech and bigotry, etc. And then many shall be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another. And many false prophets shall arise, and shall deceive many. There will be many people. I would suggest that even in now I have to be careful about what I'm saying. In political realms, there's going to be many people, elected, unelected, that will be false prophets in a sort of a way. And they're going to deceive many. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. So what does that mean? What is iniquity? Well, that just means sin. Because there is sin throughout, corruption. You can label it any sort of sin. Because all sin abounds in the last days and increases, the love of many shall wax cold. So that means people are going to get angrier. They're going to not be talking as much to their neighbors. There's not going to be cooperation. There's not going to be agreement between people anymore, as we are polarized in the last days. And that's what this article is suggesting, Zero Hedge. You are not alone. Anger is building across the world. And of course, what did Matthew 24 says? Well, it says because sin is rampant, the love of many will grow cold. That means there will be more anger in the world, between peoples, between nations. You are not alone if you are tired of watching your government grow increasingly oppressive and corrupt. Many people across the world share your pain. People continue to voice their anger and discontent, protests, kind of like the protests in Canada that were effectively put out of commission, banned. However, this is something the media often chooses not to report, for it is owned by those same forces attempting to enslave us. So Pierre Poilievre in Canada, one of his platform items is to defund the CBC. And the CBC is the public broadcaster in Canada. They are funded in large part from the government, from taxpayers ultimately. And so they're going to be, they're not going to say anything the government doesn't like. And if that happens, well, it's not going to be free and fair media, is it? Or reporting. Well, that's exactly what he's talking about. The media often chooses not to report, for it is owned by the same forces which are attempting to enslave us, in the words of this particular article writer. And it goes on here. As our anger grows, we should remember that we are not alone. We are often sheltered by mass media from the many protests. So media doesn't report on a lot of things that are happening. and it will not in the last days. Many people will miss the last days in a sort of a way. They won't recognize it's coming until it's right upon them, because the media is choosing what to show and what not to show, what to promote, what not to promote. If they want to keep the public happy and safe and calm, they're not going to be showing the videos from the middle of the protests, or show all the violent things happening around the world. They won't want to make people fear. They're not going to show people exactly what's happening in Ukraine and Russia, because they don't want people to be aware of it. They don't want people to get worried about it, or to start protesting it, or to start voting, against the government, if you will, for funding that particular war. Few Americans are currently aware of the recent protests in France, because mainstream's not really pushing it. France, Pakistan, or Germany, and a slew of other countries. A big part of a growing anger comes from a lack of accountability. The sins of those in charge, it says, seem to shed off their backs like water off a duck's back. And doesn't that reflect Matthew 24 pretty closely? Because sin abounds, love of many wax cold. People are just getting sick and tired, and they're giving up. And they're not helping their neighbors anymore. Political opinions are just so many that we are just staying away from each other now, and we're not loving each other. Politicians and those in charge tend to avoid accountability as though it was a plague. Again, using biblical terms. One example is the way we left Afghanistan. The article says it stands as a monument of America's arrogance and incompetence. Sadly, it's just one of many moments we are in the process of constructing as we throw money into corrupt black holes. It is difficult to think how a huge part of this is about spending and transferring wealth to where those in power can skim off. So we're sending money to where there's a lot of corruption. And Ukraine is commonly known as a country where there's just known to be a lot of corruption. Some call it the most corrupt country in the world, and that's where we're sending billions. And we know there's corruption happening. We know it is, but of course, that's not the narrative they want to push. They want to push the narrative of helping the Ukrainians, and there is truth to that. There is truth to the fact that there's a lot of innocent Ukrainians, and Russia went in there, and you can come up with your own reason, but there's innocent civilians there who may need help, but there's a lot of corruption otherwise, and a lot of government controls, a lot of other reasons why countries are in there, not the least of which is the manufacturing of weapons and ammunition by the military industrial complex. A lot of money being made there by the United States, and so money really is the root of all evil. Let's go on here. Radioactive cloud. This is Russia Today. A radioactive cloud threatening Western Europe. And you think this is hyperbole, and you may say, well, there was no nuclear weapons used. But do you recall that that blast that took out a weapons depot, took out the depleted uranium shells, a lot of them that were in that weapons depot? Well, because they blew that up, there is now effectively a radioactive cloud blowing over Western Europe. The destruction of the depleted uranium shells in Ukraine has produced a radioactive cloud which has been blown toward Western Europe. So you thought a nuclear weapon had to be dropped in order for this to occur. No, there's a radioactive cloud over Europe now due to this. The UK has supplied this type of munition to Ukraine to be fired from British-made Challenger tanks, and Russia is basically warning them, like they're saying, "Look, you're doing this. You're causing this radioactive cloud. You're causing nuclear Armageddon in a sort of a way because they're delivering these depleted uranium shells, and this is just the beginning." Again, we all thought there would be a mushroom cloud that would kick this off, but no, it started by destroying and even using depleted uranium shells on the battlefield. So that's incredible. This is Debka.com. This is interesting as it relates to Ezekiel 38 and 39. Remember, the United States isn't reported in the Bible as helping Israel during the time of the Ezekiel 38 and 39 war, Russia and allied nations coming against them, whether it's because they don't want to politically, or they simply can't because of economic collapse. but the relationship between U.S. and Israel is going downwards. Israel still pondering Biden's proposal of joint military planning on Iran. So Israel is wary about dealing with Biden and cooperating with Biden. This is interesting because, of course, in the last days, during the Ezekiel 38 and 39 war, it's reported as U.S. really not being a part of it. U.S. only saying a few things. And sure enough, the United States is not really interested in a strike on Iran. They're not really interested in supporting Iran. The deal U.S. President Joe Biden proposed for joint military planning with Israel on Iran is unprecedented, say U.S. officials. It would significantly upgrade the level of cooperation. However, Israel is not rushing towards acceptance, lest it would tie its hands for its own options to act against Iran. So it may even be Israel in Ezekiel 38 saying no thank you to the U.S. because the U.S. isn't of any real help in that situation. The Biden proposal was presented to Israel and its new defense minister some weeks ago, but Israel's kind of dragging their feet. They're not saying, let's cooperate. One official stressed that the Washington proposal is not about planning any kind of joint U.S. strike against Iran's nuclear program. No, the U.S. doesn't really want to help in that. It would only require the two parties to share their military plans, confer on ways to improve them, and coordinate their actions against the Islamic Republic. Again, you have Israel not wanting to deal with Biden. They don't really trust Biden. But you also have the Biden administration, probably not really interested in going to war against Iran. So you can see that the relationship is cooling, absolutely. And that seems to be what the Bible describes as the end result going into the Ezekiel 38 and 39 war. All right, this is interesting, coming from Zero Hedge. The gun industry writes to Congress as imminent ban threatens 40 million firearms. So interesting, isn't it? Coincidentally, that Canada is trying to hammer through a ban on many firearms, centerfire firearms, and the Trudeau government's trying to push that through. The Conservatives are doing what they can, but there's only so much they can do because Trudeau has a majority government right now. So interesting that at the same time, the United States is doing the same thing, trying to get rid of what they call assault firearms. That's the same terminology that Canada is using. So does it seem like they're cooperating at high levels to get rid of similar sorts of firearms? It certainly does. And there seems to be an agreement. There seems to be cooperation using the same words. And is this coming down from some government organization, some other overseeing group that are suggesting that all countries do similar things at the same time? Boy, oh boy. You talk about the banning of firearms. You talk about censorship on the internet. Canada just put through Bill C-11 to censor the internet and to control the internet. In the same way, the U.S. at the same time, pretty much, in the last couple of months, trying to push through, I think it's called the Respect Bill, trying to control the internet. So all these things are happening at the same time by the countries, not many years apart, but at the same time. So they're working, they're cooperating, they're doing all the same things. And you have to ask who is, the unseen guiding hand that is pushing all these things at the same time across different nations. And boy, oh boy, you got to admit, it does appear organized, doesn't it? Interesting. This is the expose. Apocalyptic catastrophe looms. And you've heard about this from Dr. John Campbell, who is a nurse, who has been speaking about this. And I'm surprised he hasn't been taken down for this, to be honest. But he is showing news articles, as I am. But Deagle's horrific 2025 depopulation forecast is supported by excess death figures in the millions, and then you can read that for yourself. It says here, a controversial forecast by Deagle a global intelligence and consulting firm, recently gained attention for its startling prediction of a significant depopulation event by 2025. So what could that be, and what could have triggered that? Well, recent reports from the governments of the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and various European countries, remember Western nations, really pushed hard. And there is a staggering number of excess deaths. So watch Dr. John Campbell, search him out. He has many videos on this, and he continues to put out videos. But a troubling 120,000 excess deaths that are occurring from something else that you would not expect now, and starting in, I think, the year after the pandemic started, have been recorded among USA's infants, children, and young adults as of week 40 of 2022, and a curious rise in excess deaths among children across Europe has been reported ever since the emergency use authorization of So what's causing these excess deaths? I'm not saying anything, to be sure. I'll let you consider what could be a contributing factor to that situation. I don't know what it is. I'm just looking at the news and saying, wow, pay attention. I wonder what this could be. And, wink, wink there on that point. So be prepared, folks. We're living in the last days. And the Bible describes, times when millions upon millions of people die across the world. And it doesn't necessarily say from exactly what, but there's just a whole bunch of converging factors biblically that the Bible states are coming upon us, things that are happening in the last days. This will increase with frequency and intensity. And I will leave it there, guys. I think I can cover that a little bit more in another video, but suffice it to say, we don't know exactly how the last days will come upon us, but I think we're seeing it roll out in front of us. And so the questions, when we look at this in hindsight 2020, we'll say, oh, that's how that, passage or verse, that's how these verses rolled out. But it's incredible to watch, folks. We didn't see this coming, in 2018, early 2019. Could you have conceived of anything like this happening? And none of us could, Bible prophecy scholars included. So thanks for watching. I'll leave it there. Be prepared. We are in the last days, folks. I hope you know the Lord Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Savior, because he's coming soon. But before that, perilous times will be coming. Scary times. And if you don't know Jesus, you will be scared. But if you have Jesus in your heart, you have faith and peace in these last days, and you have an understanding of what your purpose is in these last days as well. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.